Lecture today is courtship in contemporary India. And before I go on to discuss or go on to this issue, I would like you to think about the idea of courtship. And very briefly and very quickly, if somebody wants to share, what do you understand by courtship? Feel very free. We are a very small group, and it helps. Feel free to express your views. Okay, has everybody heard about courtship? Yes. Would you like to say something? Want something?
Okay. By courtship, I understand somebody says, I love you to somebody. Sometimes this proposing is denied or accepted and they get married someday, things like that.
Nobody's forcing anyone. Alright, I think everybody knows about courtship, as everybody knew about the first two topics we discussed, which was family and childhood. But what I'm going to talk to you about is courtship in contemporary India. This doesn't mean, when I say courtship in contemporary India, it doesn't mean that courtship as an institution in India is there. That's not the starting point. Now, you saw the film yesterday, and I think some section of the film also, of course, was about this whole attempt of a young boy and a young girl who fall in love. And what happens to them? And you must have seen that how difficult it is for parents and for the larger society to even imagine that something like this could happen to our children. It's taken as going against parents' wishes. So I think that film does give you some insight into courtship. Courtship, as you very rightly said, is about a relationship again. It's a social relationship between individuals who are trying to explore each other, know each other better, before they plan to maybe get married. Or we have to ask this question, whether marriage automatically and naturally follows from courtship. That is an open-ended question. And the other point I would just like to make is that when we are thinking of the family and now relationship of a certain kind of intimacy between individuals that is not bound or governed by marriage, it's a free space in a sense. We are assuming that these things are happening between heterosexual couples. There is an assumption. But I don't want to get into that area because that is really not very directly connected to what I'm going to say. But we must have that little space in mind, and secondly, that space in theory, that space conceptually, in which there is the possibility of exploring different ways in which people relate to each other, in which different types of people, not necessarily the heterosexual couples, want to know each other. But anyway, that is not very directly related, but please theoretically keep that space open. And I'm saying this in regard to contemporary India because the past 2 days, if anybody's been following the news, I have been following the news. The news since the past week, the news has been about the gay pride in the sense in metropolitan cities like Delhi, like Mumbai, like Bangalore. There have been marches by activists for gay rights. And today, I think Thursday, is the day the government is supposed to meet. You know, the ministries are supposed to meet to, well, nothing will come out of it, I can tell you for sure. But, or maybe there is a thinking, there is some line of progressive thinking in this direction, but in India there are too many other issues. There are religious sentiments involved in issues like this. There are issues of transmission, of property, of legality, of adoption, all of them. But I think as social scientists, keeping aside our personal views on the issue, it is important that we give a theoretical space to other kinds of ways in which people want to know each other better and explore each other better. But coming back to courtship in a very normative heterosexual context, it was a challenge for me to begin talking about courtship because for an anthropologist in India or a sociologist in India, how do you study courtship? It is really not there. I don't see it. It was very challenging because you see, in like my nearly a month's experience in Japan now shows me, or tells me, that there are many places I see girls and boys hang out with each other. I can't even tell you how different it is in India, in most of India. But for university campuses and restaurants and some places. But the kind of normativity, the kind of acceptance, the kind of normalcy that is, you want to think about that being something worth noting. For me, coming from India, I noticed it as one of the points in my essay on Japan, that when I write about it, or if I write about it, that is going to be an observation. And it's a very normal thing here, I think, in the West. Or maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, you should challenge me if I'm saying the incorrect thing, but this is my impression, that there are many places in the public sphere which allow, in which girls and boys are seen together. There are numerous opportunities, numerous contexts for them to intermingle. They can be eating together, they can be traveling together, they can be just going out together, they can be hanging out together. So the point I'm making is communicating to you the challenge I face in trying to understand courtship. If such and such idea is there in the Western social science literature, and then if we are saying that India is globalizing, then we should see this pattern emerging in India, or I should see it somewhere. In public, it is not so marked as in the West, and in maybe some other places in CETU. So this challenge I tried to circumvent by asking myself the question that if I don't see courtship, that certainly it must be let me find its association. And courtship is associated with youth, young people. So I started following the young people. I thought, if instead of looking for courtship, let me look at young people. So in this slide, I'm just reiterating the point I made in a moment ago, that my approach to courtship, which is a form of intimacy, inadvertently and quite unexpectedly took me to youth, took me to a stage in the developmental cycle of human beings. I don't know whether this is the best way to do it, but it was very frustrating to not know how to do it. So youth becomes a category for me in approaching courtship. Now, as you know, the format of our lectures is something like this. Having identified our research question, which I have done, that we'll be looking at courtship, and having specified our approach, you know that the next thing we do is we look at some theoretical statements, some conceptual statements on the subject. So that, and then we follow it up by providing data. So in all the 3 lectures we have done this, if you remember. And I've said the reason why we do it is that it is important that we link our study in the present to what other people have done in the past. Knowledge is a process which must be built on the basis of what others have already given us. I said this in the last lecture also, and I will repeat it even in the next one, because it is very important to acknowledge that there is a legacy, that there is a genealogy of knowledge, and to which we must link ourselves. And I think this is also a way in which social science scholarship is different from journalism. All these topics we've been studying, journalists also write about these things. They are written in popular discourse. So what is our distinctiveness? How are we different? So we are different because we just don't report the here and now. We just don't report society as episodes and events which flash in news and tomorrow they die out. Is it so that the life of a news item, how short-lived it is? It just dies out tomorrow, unless it is sensational. Then it will have a life, let's say, till the time when the hype can be built up. Then once you feel the hype is not going to be there, it dies out as a news item. So, this is our distinctiveness that we carry forward all. So as you and I write today, we are a part of a chain of all the other scholars who have contributed in that particular subject area. So we will look at as a first step, which we are following in all our lectures, youth in social sciences. And if you kind of a perusal of literature, or if you read the literature on youth in social sciences, you find that it is a socio-historic construct, by which we mean that the category of youth may not have always been there, may not have always been there as a way to think about societies. It has emerged in historic context. It has emerged historically in the context of societies. That is the first point which I noted when I was reading the literature on youth. The second point is that, following from the first one, that the attributes of youth then become context specific. That if I were to, define or say what is youth, I cannot possibly give a very general kind of set of attributes of youth. I find that it will change from context to context. Some classic statements on youth. I referred you to Philippe Pari's book, Even When We Did Childhood. And the reason why it is there in youth also because of the historic fact that there was no demarcation, in a sense, a very clear demarcation between where childhood ended and where youth began. So you could read this book for, you don't know whether it's childhood or whether it's youth. Nevertheless, I have used this, I have cited it as the first classic statement because it establishes the necessity of a historical view. Philippe Pari being an historian. And I've told you his field was history of art. He's an art historian. And the text he was reading was art, paintings and artwork. And it is on that basis that he suggests, he makes some of these points. And let's very quickly go over those. He argues that this whole idea of age, how old are you? How old am I? How old is she? How old is he? This kind of a question is a historical question. It is not a natural question. Age is not a natural fact. The idea of age emerged and gained, in a sense, importance during the 16th century Europe. And why? And how, what do you think? Now I'm going to ask you. Oh well, the answer is right there, so. But when all are we required to put our age? When are we asked our age? Who asks us our age? When does age become important? There must be an age which societies say is the age of maturity, the age we get our driving license, the age of voting, the age of marriage, officially, legally. And any other place where age becomes important? Well, we have it there. It is this. You can't, thankfully, send a 6-month-old to school now, as of now. Age becomes important. So the point is that it is with modernity that the idea of age becomes important. And age groups begin to be organized around institutions, which is to say that because such and such institution was established, it needed to know the age of people. So for instance, legal institutions, for them age was important. For governmentality, age is important. For schools, age is important. So the point is, you can think of many others. In fact, just take these lectures as points to think from. Age groups organized around institutions. In India, for instance, there was this huge debate about what should be the age, the starting age of schooling for a child. Should it be 3 years? Should it be 4 years? So when the school said it is 4 years, but anyway, parents started sending children to school when they were 3 years. They started sending them to play schools. So the idea of the play school is still not within the ambit of, the legal, in a sense, the legal age. It's a midway between an age which is not for schooling and for schooling, because it's a preparatory age. And they call it the play school. So nobody can accuse you of saying that you're sending children to study. They say you're sending children to play. Or it's like a day boarding where parents can deposit their children and feel very reassured about their safety. So, age, so we've looked at this point. And I'll come to this one before I go to this one. Educational system, according to Philippe Aries, has played a very important role in popularizing the idea of age, in officializing the idea of age. Imagine now for a moment that there was no school, no education system. We may not actually have needed age. If the child was learning by just imitating the parents, we don't need age. If the child was supposed to learn just by working with somebody, or just by, okay, I'm sending my child to the grandparents, they will teach the child how to do this and that. We don't need age for that. But because there is an institutional, the educational institution, the idea of knowledge, the idea that you've got to be educated, age becomes important. So this is a very important point made by Aries. Then he also notes that in the 18th century Europe, the adolescent, the idea of the adolescent becomes important. It emerges. It was not there. And I think if you're interested, you must read this book. Read it like a bedtime storybook. It is there in Japanese translation. It's very descriptive, rich descriptions. And it's like a story actually. It's his story, HIS-STORY. So it is a story at the end of the day. But it is an HIS, his story and her story also. So if we were to just correct that. So adolescence, he says, emerged between childhood and adulthood.